I've worked the night shift at Hollow Creek Station for nearly 10 years, and I can say with certainty that nothing out here ever changes. This whole place is a relic, rotting from the inside out. It is perched in the valley between two mountain ridges, where fog likes to settle thick as wool. Once, long before my time, it had been a pulse point of the region. Freight came through in constant streams, passenger trains stopped nearly every hour, and the little town around it thrived on the constant motion of wheels and smoke. Now, it's a graveyard. The schedules are out of date by decades. Half the tracks have weeds sprouting through the ties, and the platforms smell of rust and rain. But my company, in its stubbornness, keeps a skeleton crew manning the station. 4 men to keep a corpse breathing. There was me, Jonah, Alice, and Frank. We checked the signal lights, kept the switches from freezing, and filed empty reports into binders no one would ever read. On some nights, I wondered if the higher-ups even remembered this place existed. And the strangest thing was how easily we settled into it. Routine quickly became our anchor. Jonah had a way of filling the dead hours with jokes. Half of them were crude, the other half was even worse. Alice would grumble and correct him, his voice pinched with that bureaucrat's pride. Like, if he kept the logbook neat enough, the world might still care. Frank mostly slept through his shifts, claiming he would wake up at the snap of a finger if anything serious happened. Though we all knew better. And me, I was the quiet one, content to watch and listen, to drink bad coffee and mark the time. We weren't friends in the way men are outside of work, but closeness grows in strange soil. Long nights blur the edges of resentment, and repetition makes familiarity feel like comfort. We existed in a rhythm, Jonah making Alice sigh, Alice keeping score, Frank snoring, and me pretending to monitor the radio. It was boring, but also stable, and after years of it, I almost believed it would go on forever. On that particular night, rain had been falling since dusk, and the roof rattled with it. The water ran in steady rivers down the cracked concrete outside, and inside our office, the air was thick with the smell of damp coats and old paper. The radio hissed softly in my corner. Jonah sat with his boots up on the desk, thumbing through a magazine that looked ready to fall apart. Alice hunched over the logbook, his pen scratching uselessly as he filled out a column no one would ever read. And finally, Frank was on the bench, mouth open, head tilted down over his face. It was so ordinary it felt untouchable. Then the whistle blew. I thought at first it was the wind, a trick of the storm maybe, howling through the eaves. But no, it had a tone to it, a sound too long, too low to be mistaken for anything else. It was a train whistle. All of us froze, Jonah lowered his magazine. Alice's pen stopped mid-stroke, and Frank snorted awake and sat up. That, Jonah's voice cracked, and he tried to laugh it off. That was a train. It can't be, Alice muttered, already flipping through his book of schedules. He knew as well as the rest of us it was pointless, but for him it was a reflex. He needed the numbers to say what reality could not. Sure sounded like one, I said, though my stomach had already gone cold. The four of us simply waited. The rain thudded on the roof. The lamps buzzed overhead. And Frank rubbed his eyes. Then this whistle came again. Closer this time. A long, mournful cry that seemed to rattle in the glass panes of the office windows. Jesus, Frank muttered, pushing himself off the bench. Haven't heard one of those in years. Jonah gave a crooked grin, though his eyes were wide. Guess the old girl's not as dead as we thought. Alice simply snapped the book shut. There's nothing. No scheduled arrivals, no transfers, no unsignaled freight. Doesn't change the fact that it's out there, Frank said. And if it's on our line, it's our problem. He made it sound like an order, though I knew the edge in his voice came from the same unease I felt myself. We went out together, pulling on our coats and stepping into the night. The storm hit us hard. The rain, the fog, and this endless dark. Our lanterns only cast pale circles that barely pierced the mist. And the station behind us looked even more dead under the storm. The walls were streaked with weather, and the platforms deserted. Then came the sound, the churn of wheels, the clank of iron, and the hiss of steam. A vibration rose under our boots, growing stronger with each second. Then, through the fog, a light bloomed. Not the bright white of a headlamp, but something duller, orange, like fire behind thick smoke. It swelled, swallowed the mist, and then the shape came. It was vast and black, the front of an engine forcing itself out of the night. The train was enormous. The iron sides gleamed slick with rain. It was scarred with rust, and its edges were warped. Chains rattled along its length as it crawled past. Car after car, stretching further than the lantern's beam could reach. Its headlamp was a blind eye, its glow sickly and distorted. It stopped with a shriek that drilled through my skull, the brakes screaming against the tracks. Steam hissed from its vents, rolling over us in choking waves. We simply stood there, 4 men against a machine that should not have existed. Then the nearest car's door slid open with a groan. A breath of air spilled out, hot and foul, reeking of rot and something chemical that burned my throat. I turned my head, gagging, but the smell didn't go away. It clung to me, heavy and cloying, like the exhale of something alive. No one came out. No conductor stepped forward. No passengers shuffled onto the platform. The train simply waited. Jonah tried for humor, though his voice shook. Well, guess she's ours tonight. Alice whispered, almost to himself. It's not on the schedule. It's not anywhere. Frank straightened his shoulders, though his face had gone pale. It's still a train. We are railwaymen. It is our job to inspect. The others looked at him like he had lost his mind, but I kind of understood. He wasn't speaking out of duty. He was speaking because the alternative, the thought of turning away, was somehow worse. We stood in the rain, the four of us, lanterns flickering in our hands, staring at that yawning black door. And then, as if drawn by some force we couldn't resist, we climbed aboard. The first thing I noticed when we stepped inside was the air. It wasn't just foul, it was heavy. It clung in my throat, slick as grease. My lantern flame shrank, sputtering like it was fighting to breathe. The car itself was dim, lined with cracked leather seats that were bolted to the warped floorboards. Dust layered every surface, though it didn't look like normal dust. It was dark, sticky, almost like ash that smeared instead of lifting. The windows were caked so thick with grime, the storm outside was reduced to a vague smear of light and shadow. After a while, Jonah tried to cut the silence. Well, he said, running his hand across a seat back. I've seen worse. His voice didn't carry right though. The sound felt kind of dampened, like the walls were drinking it in. Alice bent low, studying the brass fittings at the end of a row. His pen was still tucked behind his ear, a habit he couldn't shake. These aren't company issue. The gauge is wrong. The bolts don't match. Who cares? Jonah muttered. The place just needs a dust rag. But Alice was already crouching, running a hand along the floor seams, tapping the boards with the edge of his boot. That was Alice. Bury fear under procedure. If it wasn't in his logbook, he'd invent it. Frank swung his lantern wider, his shoulders squared. Seats are bolted in fine, frames solid, the wood's holding up. He pulled at one of the overhead straps and tore it loose in his hand, with a shriek of rotten leather. All right, he muttered, tossing it aside. Not that solid. We fanned out in pairs, lanterns bobbing, every man falling into old rhythms. We had been through so many inspections over the years, checking bearings, latches, windows and couplings, that our hands moved by muscle memory. It was almost comforting, like slipping into a language we all still knew. I rubbed at one of the windows, trying to clear enough grime to see through. But my rag came away black, wet, and streaked with something that smelled like burnt hair. I wiped harder, and for half a heartbeat, I saw outside. Not rain or storm, but a blur of black shapes rolling past. Too fast to focus on, like shadows pressed against glass. My stomach lurched, and I stepped back, and by the time I looked again, there was nothing there. Just my face in the smeared paint, pale and uncertain. Jonah was whistling low under his breath, pretending at calm as he checked the luggage racks. Empty, he said, though he sounded disappointed. Could have used a souvenir. Alice snapped at him without looking up. Focus! On what? Dust? Jonah flicked his rack against the seat, watching the suit puff into the air. That's not exactly riveting. It's our job, Alice said sharply, though his hand trembled as he scribbled notes onto the corner of his logbook. Every detail matters. Frank had crouched at the far end of the aisle, inspecting the door. The handle's rusted, but it should still give. Come, help me with this. Jonah joined him, and both men heaved against the iron slab. The hinges screamed, but they didn't yield. Stuck, Jonah panted, kicking the base. Figures. Alice straightened, his voice tight. The through doors are never locked. That's regulation. Maybe it warped shut. Frank spat to the side. It's an old car. The metal shifts. It's still not right, Alice muttered, chewing at his lip. The silence after his words pressed too hard. Even Jonah stopped trying to fill it in. The four of us just stood there in the half-light, breath loud, the smell of oil and char thick in our noses. Then the floor gave a faint shiver beneath our boots. At first I thought it was just a storm, the wind buffeting the car. But then the sound came, a groan so deep it rattled in my bones, followed by the unmistakable lurch of motion. The whole train shuddered forward. Hold up, Alice stumbled, catching himself on a seat. Who's at the engine? None of us answered, because we all knew the truth. No one. We had seen no crew, and no conductor. The groan became a steady rumble. Our lanterns swung violently as the floorboards vibrated underfoot. Frank moved fast, heading back toward the entrance. Out! Now! Before... He froze. The door we had entered through was gone. Not stuck or warped, simply gone. Just a smooth black wall, the iron seamless and unbroken. What the... Jonah's voice cracked. He rushed forward, pressing his palm to the metal. No. This was the door. This was the goddamn door. Alice slammed his fists against it, his voice rising. We walked through here. His shouts died in the heavy air, muffled like everything else. I felt the train gather speed. The rhythm of the wheels grew faster, pounding through the floor and filling my chest like a second heartbeat. Jonah rattled the other door, the one at the far end. Locked. Son of a... won't... He slammed his shoulder into it. Then again, breath ragged. But it didn't budge. I pressed to one of the windows, desperate for any glimpse of where we were. But what I saw wasn't the storm. The outside was fully black, but not empty. Shapes moved in it, huge and slow, like silhouettes pressed just beyond the glass. They had no form I could name, only motion, writhing and endless. The sight made my head throb, and I staggered back, bile burning in my throat. Jesus Christ, I whispered. Jonah just grabbed my sleeve. What did you see? I shook my head, unable to answer even if I wanted to. I just felt the heat rise. The air pressed harder against my lungs, and it smelled of scorched iron and old blood. Every surface of the train seemed to pulse with a dull vibration, like it wasn't carrying us out of the dark, but bringing us deeper into it. We gathered in the aisle again, 4 men with lanterns trembling in our hands, staring at one another. Jonah's grin was long gone. Alice's pen had snapped in his grip, the ink smeared across his palm. And Frank's calm had curdled into something brittle and desperate. Me, I couldn't stop clenching my jaw, my teeth grinding together as if bracing for impact. But there was no impact, only the steady, merciless acceleration of the black train as it carried us into a place no track has ever been laid. The air inside the train had changed. It pressed heavier against my chest now, hot and sour, as though we were riding through a furnace chimney. I even tasted it in the back of my throat with every breath. A kind of metallic sting, like scorched iron, mixed with the sweetness of rot. Sweat clung to my skin, and still I shivered. The others noticed it too, though no one wanted to say it out loud. The silence between us was tighter than the walls, broken only by the relentless pounding of the wheels below. At first, I thought it was only the noise that had changed. The rhythm of the train had deepened, thickened, until it no longer sounded like wheels at all, but like a hammer striking into the earth, beating in time with the pulse in my skull. The others noticed it too, though no one wanted to say it out loud. The silence between us was tighter than the walls, broken only by the relentless pounding of the wheels below. At first, I thought it was only the noise that had changed. The rhythm of the train had deepened, thickened, until it no longer sounded like wheels at all, but like a hammer striking into the earth, beating in time with the pulse in my skull. Each lurch seemed to drop us further, the air trembling around us as though the world itself were sinking. Jonah sat in the aisle, hunched over, muttering through his cracked lips, his lantern dangling from his hand. Alice scribbled furiously in his logbook, his fingers smudged with ink, the pen stabbing the page so hard It tore holes straight through. And Frank hadn't moved in some time. He just sat forward, elbows on his knees, fists against his mouth, his eyes fixed on the door like he meant to burn it open just by staring. And I couldn't stand the silence anymore. I leaned toward Alice. "What are you writing?" His eyes darted up, bloodshot and wild. "Descriptions," he said too quickly. "Records, facts. If I can put them into words, they are real. And if they are real, they can be explained. And if they can be explained..." His hand twitched violently, smearing ink across the page. "Then they can be fought." I almost asked what we were supposed to be fighting, but Jonah's muttering cut through, sharper this time, nearly a hiss. Not oil, flesh, burning flesh." The words twisted my stomach. I pressed my sleeve over my mouth and nose, but the smell had thickened until no fabric could stop it. I glanced toward the window, if only to distract myself, and froze. The countryside was gone. The tracks no longer cut across fields or hills. They ran over jagged rock, glowing faintly from within, as though fire licked just beneath its surface. In the distance stretched rivers of molten light, winding like veins through the earth. And shapes moved along their banks, low, crawling figures that riffed over each other in endless tides. Even through the sealed glass, their screams reached us, thin and constant, weaving through the roar of the train. Jonah surged to his feet, pressing his lantern against the window. His face was pale in the flicker. "You see them? Christ almighty, do you see them?" His voice cracked. "They are not shapes. They are people. They are people." Frank didn't look. His fists pressed tighter against his mouth, and his words came muffled. "Don't give it space in your head. Do not let it in." Alice squeezed his eyes shut, whispering too fast for us to follow. His pen scratched across the page blindly, the ink dripping like blood. The train jolted hard enough that we all nearly lost our footing. Lanterns rattled overhead, and I swore I heard something groan deep within the walls, as though the train itself had lungs that ached to breathe. Alice screamed then. His logbook clattered to the floor, pages torn by his own frantic scrawl. He clutched his head with both hands, rocking violently in his seat. Stop it! Stop it! I won't take it! I won't take the ticket!" "Alice!" I grabbed for him, but he lurched back, his nails tearing red furrows across his cheeks. His eyes bulged with terror. Don't punch it! Don't make me punch it!" Jonah tried to hold his wrist, but Alice was stronger than he had any right to be. His shriek rattled the air. Then it cut off with a sharp snap as the door at the far end of the car opened. The sound silenced us all, and a man stepped inside. His uniform was neat, black as soot, the brass buttons glinting faint in the lantern light. He moved with a calmness so ordinary it chilled me more than any scream could have. His lantern swayed in his hand, and I swear its flame didn't burn with fire, but with shadow. The conductor's smile split his face. It was too wide, too patient. His voice was soft, steady.
Tickets, please.
Jonah staggered back, shaking his head. There's no one here. You're not real. You're not real. Alice shrieked, his body looking rigid, eyes rolling wide. The conductor stopped in front of him. He didn't touch him. He only tipped his cap. And with that simple gesture, Alice went still. I watched his skin melt like wax under heat, his features sagging until his face was nothing but a smooth blank sheet. He folded slowly into his seat among the husks, indistinguishable now. Another passenger. Jonah's scream cracked into sobbing laughter. He stumbled backward, lantern swinging wildly. No, you're not taking me. You bastard, you can't. He bolted down the aisle toward the far door, hammering his fists against it. And the conductor simply turned, still calm and smiling. He lifted his lantern, just slightly. Jonah froze where he stood, fist still raised against the door. His body shivered, skin peeling back in thin strips, curling away from his bones. He shrieked once before crumbling into ash that scattered across the floorboards, snuffed by the wind that whistled through the cracks. After Jonah crumbled into ash, silence swallowed the car. Only the rumble of the train remained, that constant heartbeat hammering us deeper into the earth. The conductor lingered in the aisle a moment longer, lantern swinging lazily at his side. Then, as though nothing had happened, he tipped his cap to us and continued down into the next car. The door closed behind him, and the sound of his boots faded into the distance. Frank sagged against the wall, his shoulders heaving, his fists, still balled tight, lowered slowly to his sides. His voice was little more than a rasp. "You saw that," he said. It wasn't a question. I simply nodded, my throat too dry to speak. He wiped the sweat from his brow, leaving a streak of grime. "He will be back." Neither of us spoke for a long while. The husks sat quiet around us, their heads lolling slightly with the sway of the train, their eyeless faces fixed forward. It was almost worse when they didn't move, when they didn't react. It made them seem like furniture, something the train itself had grown, and I didn't want to think about that. We sat in the dark as the hours bled. The lanterns flickered low, their oil thinning. Sometimes I thought I saw faces among the husks. Alice, Jonah, even men I had never met before. But when I blinked again, the faces moved away. My head started to throb with the pressure of the descent, and my stomach had long since knotted into a hollow ache. "Look outside," Frank whispered. I turned toward the window, and hell had grown clearer. We rode now through a canyon carved of blackened stone, its walls cracked and bleeding fire. The sky was not sky at all, but a red chasm that stretched endless in every direction, swollen with smoke and shrieking wind. Along the rivers of molten light crawled thousands and thousands of figures, their bodies naked and raw, their bones jutting through blistered skin. Some of them wailed, clawing at the rock. Others tore at each other, gnawing flesh with shattered teeth. Further off in the distance, towers rose from the dark, ripped and sharp like the spines of dead beasts, each crowned with fires that bled black smoke into the air. The screams carried inside. I pressed my palms against my ears, but it made no difference. They weren't outside anymore. They were inside me, rattling around my skull until I thought I might split it open. Frank gripped my shoulder then, his hand shaking but firm. "Don't listen to them. Don't look too long. That's how they get in." I turned away, sucking in sour air, though the cry still echoed in my chest. The train jolted again, harder than before, and all the husks sat upright in unison. The sound of boots returned. The conductor was coming back. The door at the end of the car opened without a sound, and he stepped through, lantern swinging gently, that same placid smile carved across his face. His voice rolled like velvet over broken glass.
"Tickets."
My body stiffened. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The husks shifted slightly in their seats, as if waiting for his command. Frank moved before I could stop him. He planted himself in the center of the aisle, squaring his shoulders, his fists clenched so tight they shook. "You took the others. You're not taking me." The conductor tilted his head, amused. He lifted his lantern.
"Everyone rides."
"I'm not everyone," Frank spat. And for the first time, the conductor's smile wavered. Only for a breath, but I saw it. The flicker of something deeper, something hungrier. He stepped closer. The husks leaned forward in their seats. Frank swung, his fist connected with the man's jaw. I heard the crack of bone, but The conductor didn't even flinch. Instead, he reached out and tapped Frank's chest with one pale finger. Frank simply froze. His breath hitched, and for a moment, I thought maybe he had stopped him. Maybe he had found some way to resist. But then his chest caved inward with a wet crack. His skin folded like paper around him, collapsing until there was nothing left but a hollow shell slumped across the seat. The husks around us stirred, making space. Frank had joined their ranks. I stumbled backward, lantern rattling in my hand, my knees nearly buckling, my voice scraped out as little more than a whisper. "Why me? Why haven't you taken me?" The conductor turned his lantern toward me, and inside its flame, I swore I saw 1,000 screaming faces, all writhing in silence. His smile was calm again, patient even.
You're not ready.
He said softly, and then he just moved on. The door closed behind him, and I was left alone among the dead. The train thundered deeper. Time unraveled. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, hours, maybe even days. Hunger gnawed at my gut. Thirst burned my throat. But those needs felt pale against the greater weight crushing me. I watched the husks. I listened to the screams outside. I thought about Alice, about Jonah, about Frank. And I felt something inside me splinter. I tried to fight it at first. Tried to believe there was a way out, a way back. But the longer I sat, the clearer it became. This train never stopped. The tracks never ended. There was no way out. And my hope withered. When I slumped against the seat, eyes dry, chest hollow, and let myself sink fully into despair, the train jolted, harder than before. The whole world started to spin. The walls rattled. The lanterns went out all at once, plunging me into black. I braced for the conductor's voice, for his hand, for the ticket that would finish me. But instead, silence. And when I opened my eyes again, I was standing on the platform. The night was still. The air smelled of coal and rain, not fire and rot. The black train sat behind me, its windows dark. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw faces in the glass, pressed close, watching me. Then the engine hissed. A plume of smoke swallowed the sight, and when it cleared, the train was gone. I was alone but free. And in the pit of my stomach, where despair had rooted, something else now lived. The certainty that one day, when the whistle blew again, the black train would return for me.